Meanwhile, we check in once a month with our Battle Creek State Representative, Dr. John Bizon. Today is the day here in January. Good morning.
Good morning, Richard. It is so great to be with you this morning.
Well, thank you. Happy to have you here, and first time in 2017.
It is the first time. I missed you on our last couple of dates when you sent Tim in to pinch hit for you.
Pinch hitting a couple times, yeah. So here's our back to normal stance right now. We heard you a little in the news yesterday talking about the new session, and we're underway now, aren't we?
We are underway. You know, we had our opening of session as was determined by the Michigan Constitution beginning right at noon on Wednesday of this past week.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been meeting even prior to that as a caucus, trying to make sure that we have plans to move forward in a unified manner. And we anticipate there being significantly greater cooperation between the sides of the aisle. Our new speaker has made that a priority, civility within the chambers and caucus, and I am looking forward to good things from Tom Leonard as Speaker of the House.
Well, I think some of us listening, maybe a lot of us listening, would cheer that on, wouldn't we? Let's all get along, shall we? We'll talk about that here in just a second. You know, yesterday the Calhoun County Clerk was here, and Norlander, talking about some of the rearview mirror stats on voting in the county. And one of the interesting things, and we've talked about this before because it was a decent story at the time, was the whole straight party ticket option, which was supposed to go away and didn't after a lot of back and forth. If I recall, you voted against taking that away, if I remember.
I believe that, yes, that was one of those bills that had multiple sections in it, and if memory serves me right, I did vote against that.
Yeah, and I remember you saying that some of the reaction that you'd heard from constituents was, we want that option.
And I think that we do need to make it easy for our voters to be able to vote. And the question becomes, we want to make sure that no one is disenfranchised. We want to make sure that everyone has the right to vote. We want to make sure that all the voters are registered voters and they are citizens. And, you know, voting ought to be easy. Voting is a right, but it doesn't necessarily have to be arduous. It doesn't have to be hours in a line from my standpoint. You know, we do so much over the internet these days. We do so much banking and other things that require secure transactions that we should be able to figure this out. And I look forward to working with our county clerk on elections and other things moving into the future. You know, there was the concern by a Detroit judge that the Detroit voters were going to be disenfranchised by this the straight ticket voting issue. And I believe that's still tied up in the courts. I do anticipate that there should be resolution to that issue. We are one of a few states that continue to do the straight party ticket voting. But then in other states, you are allowed to vote in other manners as well. They'll have extended periods for voting. They'll allow, and I think we really need to look at secure internet voting as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we've talked with the Secretary of State about that, you know, she isn't generally in the room with me when we're talking, but you can feel the hesitation. Because I'm sure she's concerned about the issue of security. You
surely don't want to have our system hacked. You know, there was so much talk about the Russians and the Chinese and the Israelis hacking into to figure out what our politicians are doing, especially at the Lansing level. I don't think that that's going on too much at the state level. I don't know that the Russians have a great deal of interest in what goes on here in the state of Michigan, per se.
Looking more at the national level, right?
But at the national level, that becomes a very significant issue. And if you're talking about some of the national elections, then yes, it's something that we need to make sure remains secure and that we do not disenfranchise any of our voters when we go out there.
By the way, the clerk says 47% of voters in Calhoun County use the straight party ticket option, one party or another. And you can see that info, including clicking through to the report that the Chief Deputy of Elections, Terry Lowe, put together. And she referred to it yesterday when she was here. You can click through and see that at WBCKFM.com. We're here today with Representative Dr. John Bizon. We'll talk about money coming up in just a moment, and this whole National Affordable Care Act scrutiny that's going on right now. when we come back on WBCK. With Dr. John Bizon, representative from Battle Creek in the Michigan House of Representatives. So this is, you get into the chamber, you get sworn in, it's a new session, and then it's budget time practically, isn't it?
It is, especially if we continue to follow the pattern that has been set over the previous 6 years. And, prior to that, we had divided houses, one side being Republican, one side being Democratic, and they would bicker into the new year, the new fiscal year, and a couple times shut down government.
Right.
And nowadays we try to make sure that by June of the year that people know what their budget is going forward. So many of the budgets get started over, like all the school budgets get started July 1. And when you don't get a budget done until November, they're halfway through their school year. And if they have to make a cut, the cut has to be twice as big because they were not planning
already
on
spending.
That. They spend it, and it makes it much, much harder to plan when you don't have that budget done at an appropriate time. But in order for us to get that budget done in June, we have to jump on it right away. And right now we are still awaiting our assignments. We have not yet been assigned to our various committees. And so all of us are looking forward to seeing if you're going to be serving on a policy committee or 3 or 4 policy committees or the appropriation side of the House. And typically you get one side or the other. Last year they were kind enough to give me both sides in the areas of healthcare. But outside of that, typically you get either healthcare or policy, or you get appropriations. And so we'll be waiting on those assignments, seeing what they are going to be asking of us for the coming year.
For those who don't know, how do they decide that, by the way?
They have a committee on committees that will meet, interestingly enough.
A meeting about meetings.
Exactly, correct. And they'll have 5 or 6 or 7 people assigned, and they'll go through the roster, and they'll send out a survey of what is it that you want to do.
Okay.
And they try to accommodate most people, getting them on various committees. I think that it was said that Republicans, for the most part, will be serving on 4 different committees because there's a larger group of Republicans,
right.
And I believe that the Democrats are going to be serving on 3 different committees. But the Democratic committee assignments are going to be coming from the Democratic side of the House. They're going to tell us what members they want serving on what committees, as the Republicans are going to be coming from the Republican side of the House. And that was that committee on committees, and they've been doing their work over the last couple of weeks, and we should be finding out sometime around the State of the State address that is coming up here early next week again. And I am pleased to announce that my guest for the State of the State to join me on the floor is our former mayor, Deb Owens, and we're going to have her down, and I'm looking forward to her company for the day.
All right. So what committees does John Bizon want to serve on?
I asked them to put me on health care, and I didn't really care whether it was on the policy side or the appropriation side. I asked for the policy side as my first choice because I think we have significant opportunity. We're going to be talking about the repeal of the ACA here shortly.
Yeah.
And obviously there is something that's going to have to be done to protect our people. I always said that if we cannot do health care better than the federal government here at the state level by at least 5%, then shame on us. And when you ask, what does that actually translate to in dollars? That's nearly a $20 billion line item that you're talking about. It's the largest single line item in state government, and 5% of $20 billion, if my math is correct, is nearly $1 billion. And think of what you could do with an extra $1 billion here if they made that available. If you could take care of your people at a cheaper price and still have some dollars left over for other projects, roads, education, retirements, decreasing the debt of future promises, the debt load that we are carrying here as a state. And, there are just lots of great things that we could do with that.
Well, we'll talk more about that in just a second, too, and Dr. Bizon's perspectives on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Coming up in just a minute on WBCK. Representative Dr. John Bizon with us for a few more minutes. So your perspective is interesting because as a physician, you look at the Affordable Care Act situation through that lens that not all of us have the advantage of looking through. What's your sense about what's happening now with the potential repeal and replace, as the president-elect says?
I'll be looking forward to their leadership and guidance, of course. I think that we have significant opportunity. I think that our healthcare system is severely broken. We spend nearly $3 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars each year on healthcare here in America, and much of that, from the national perspective, is on Medicare and Medicaid. And in order to finance that system, we go $1 trillion in debt every year. We're up to $20 trillion in debt that we have spent that we don't have the money for. Mm-hmm. And we have borrowed it, and we have had unprecedented low interest rates, which kept this affordable. But now the interest rates are in the process of going up, and I see our national debt as being one of our major problems at the federal level. And the driver of that, in my mind, is largely our healthcare spending, and we need to learn to do healthcare better. I am excited by the thought that we may have 50 different states doing 50 different things, trying to manage their healthcare costs. And I do feel that there is opportunity there. That if you have 50 states doing different things, you have that experimental lab that you can say, wow, look what they're doing down in Indiana, or look what they did out at Utah. And say, we want to take this from that program and utilize it and get to a place where we're doing better. And I think that pilot programs are something that we have to invest in, where someone will stand up and say, we ought to be doing things a little bit differently. And I was at a seminar in Kalamazoo on Wednesday, a program that was put on by the Kalamazoo Academy of Medicine. And at that, they had Senator Colbeck from the Senate down, and he's pushing the idea of direct primary care services, where we have these doctors out there who say, let us take care of your needs, and we'll do this on a subscription basis, something like concierge medicine, but for the masses. And they say, we can get this done if you're 30 years old for $39 a month, for essentially $40 a month, and that would be a whole lot cheaper. You'd have to have catastrophic care, right, built into that system as well. But they feel that they can significantly reduce the cost of care with that sort of approach. And
so you're just carrying a catastrophic policy, but you're paying your own subscription to healthcare access that does not involve a traditional healthcare policy with an insurance company.
Well, that's where the catastrophic part comes in, right, is in a traditional type program at that point. And again, you run into those deductibles, I would have to imagine. So you surely don't want to, but for your routine care and for your annual cost of care, presuming that you don't have to get into that catastrophic plan, it'd be significantly reduced. And if you can do that for large portions of the population, then this would be something that that Senator Colbeck feels might be an excellent way to approach this. And I told him that I'd like to see that pilot program and see exactly how that worked. And, all so often when we deal in state government, as we did with the ACA, we say, this is the way that we are headed. This is the right way, having very little data to back that up, not knowing exactly what all the ramifications are, not being able to tell any of the unintended consequences of those actions which we are about to undertake. And with pilot programs, you get to kick the tires, you get to walk around and say, oh, I didn't realize that this was going to happen because we did that.
Right.
And,
it's interesting, though. I think one of the overarching themes of the Affordable Care Act was, okay, we have a certain number of folks out there who are uninsured, and we want to try and help with that problem. The other thing is, and this has been the subject of some discussion here in the last few days, the notion of pre-existing conditions and being accepted in spite of that, which wasn't always the case before. There's some talk in some media outlets that is one of the things that's on the table to be taken away. How do you maintain all of that and still do better?
I'm under the impression that those in Washington are very much aware of what the American people have said. These are good things that has come out of the ACA, and I'm under the impression that President-elect Trump is fully on board with keeping those portions that had been ever quite so popular. And so I really don't anticipate that. And besides that, we at the state level can also say, hey, we are not going to allow those clauses within our health care contracts here within the state. Typically, in the past, healthcare has been a state-run issue. And it was only recently that this became a federal issue. You have to look at the opportunity to sell insurance policies across state lines. There are those who advocate for that and not be willing to, again, I don't know if it's a good idea to change it quickly all in one step, but, to have a pilot program and let's see whether or not that works, and get a couple thousand people into a program like that and see if they are satisfied or dissatisfied. There is always the concept of what exactly is our health insurance, because our health insurance has morphed away from the concept of, gee, this is going to be an insurance product into this is a prepaid health care program where you pay the dollars up front and you get your services down the road. There are those who argue that for preventive care, that's a very, very good thing, that by increasing the preventive care, you decrease subsequent costs down the road. And
it's just the human nature to get our frame of mind in the right spot.
Exactly correct. And if you can make health care affordable so that you and I can afford it, and not just insurance companies or big corporations or state governments or perhaps those that print money, it would be great to get out there and be able to do all the things. But we need to revise our system so that you know what is good for you. You need to know what preventive services you are due. And I think that with this age of computerization, that should be a very easy thing to figure out so that you can get your warnings and so that it's not your doctor who says, wow, you need to get your whatever test you're due for, but you yourself know that, and you have the option of saying, well, I'm going to ignore this, or yeah, let's get this and let's take care of this. You have that warning light come on in your car, and you say, wow, maybe we need to do something like that, and we don't have that in healthcare as of yet. Maybe we need that.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Representative Dr. John Bizon will check in again in February.
Thank you so much for letting me join you, Richard.
Thank you.